we have the lead, Mr. John Shackley.
Yeah!
Will Parker himself. And then we have his screen cousin, Henry Parker, played by Jim Baker.
Yeah!
We could do with some of Ken's music here, couldn't we? And of course, who can forget Jean-Paul Delier, better known as Beanpole, better known as Ceri Seel. And the gentleman whose job it was to make sure they behaved, Dave Edwards. So Dave, the big question, have they been behaving themselves?
What, since, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't have been any worse than they were then when we... I think I was thinking about them. Is this one? Yeah.
Right.
They were quite a handful, and I think if they'd carried on, they would not be here now. So they've clearly tempered their ways and got much better in those 40 years.
Sure. So
I feel a bit of a fraud here. I'm the only one who wasn't in it.
you're still a star.
Yeah, but you were.
In our hearts. So, for all four of you, what did the tripods mean when you were making it? And what does it mean to you now, 40 years on? We'll start with Ceri.
So, something that's really struck me actually being here now, looking at it in retrospect, when I was making it, it was just a stroke of luck. I was just listening to all these creative people up here before, and I was thinking, I'm just here by dint of the fact that I'm a bit taller than most people, and just happened to be stumbling along the BBC studio corridors at the right time. So I do feel slightly humbled by that realisation. So at the time, it was I never had huge ambitions to be an actor, really, but it was just that this opportunity came up. So I thought, well, you don't turn an opportunity like that down. And also, I think there was a sense of it being a way of getting out of the sort of conventional track a bit. That has had many more difficult consequences since, because sometimes when you step off the roundabout, it's hard to step back on again. But that's another question. So at the time, it was a heck of an adventure, really, and quite challenging in its way as well. I was 17 and I came up to London, and I found it quite disorientating at those times as well. But it's fantastic seeing it all back. I'm well impressed. Chris, that edit you made was a really nice summary of the whole series. So it made. I feel really proud. Wow, I was part of that. Really, it was really out there, that series. I mean, you don't know when you're on the inside of it quite so much. Yeah, anyway, that's my talents with.
Thank you, Ceri. I think for me, I'm sorry if I'm stealing, because John and I met last night and we were talking about what it meant. For me, it's always been the relationships back then, and the memories that created. We've got memories of the rehearsal rooms and the huge breakfast you could get for 5 pence. Yeah. The long coach journeys with 3 people on a 52-seater coach. Just going, Bible readings and the relationships now that have carried on now are fantastic. So, John and Ceri haven't met each other in 40 years, but it sparked off really the same as it ever was. And I've built relationships up with a lot of guys that are in the audience, people from Germany and other English-based fans. And it's always been special to me. It's always been a unique part of my life. It hasn't dominated it, but it has certainly been very special. And the main thing for me is the relationship. throughout the time.
That's it.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to put into words how I'm feeling right now, because it's when I listen to Richard and Steve, and Sharon and Ken and Bob's at the back as well, and see Robin and everyone and all of you, you know, this was a massive undertaking that the BBC did. I don't think it's ever been done since, if you think about it. The scale, Phoebe's costumes, we were talking before with Ceri, I really wanted those moon boots. He had a coat that was just exceptional. We were like, we want to keep this, you know.
Handmade for me, that
Yeah,
coat.
all bespoke, all handmade. It was wonderful. And I think, you know, when you are on the inside, as Jim said, it's very difficult to imagine the scope and the enormity of what this show was. And I think I was just lucky because I had a job, you know. I was very fortunate. I do remember, I think it was probably February or March of '83, I read in The Stage, which was, I don't know if it's still around today, it was like Variety magazine in the US. They were going to make this TV show, and there were 3 male teenage leads. No female teenage leads. Unfortunately, that will probably change today, but never mind. And I thought, oh, I better write in, but it never happened, and it never came about. And I was very fortunate that the BBC were interested in an actor who, his name was Vic Maguire, and he was in this thing called the Liverpool Young Actors Cooperative, which myself and about 5 or 6 other actors who were at the Everyman Youth Theatre, we got involved. Some of them you may know today. David Morrissey was in there, and Ian Hart, Vic Maguire, Shirley, and a few others. And they sent, Roger sent in this photos and little mini CV of all of us to the BBC, and they said, well, he looks too old, but what about this kid? Can we see him? And I'll never forget when I walked in to the room when I met the late, great Chris Barry, fabulous gentleman. And I met Richard, and I met Graham, the late great Graham Theakston as well. It was very surreal. I didn't know that they'd seen like 1 billion other people for this part. And I walked in and they just looked at me like, very strange, and I'm kind of like, why are they looking at me so weird? Like, dude, what's going on? You know? But I guess they saw something that you know, resulted in me being chosen, and I was very, very lucky, and you know, quite right too. The experience of the friendships that you make when you are only just turned 18, and you're thrust into this massive project, and you have no wisdom of life, no maturity. And you have to try and pretend that you're actually a little bit younger than 13, because you get capped at the age of 13, right? So, 16. Or was it 13 or 14? 16.
13 in the book, 16 in the series.
16 in the series. So we were all really just under 15, supposedly, apart from, I think Jean-Paul was a little bit older. So, trying to be an actor, trying to do your best, and yet at the same time, you're in this position where you are kind of like in a bubble. And I think for me, the relationship between myself and Jim and Ceri in the first series was definitely something you can't put a price on. You can't emotionally convey to somebody, you know, and the pertinence of it was fabulous. And we were 3 tearaways, I think, but we all had our distinctive characteristics. And the binding force behind us 3 was Dave. So Dave was like the minder, the dad, the mate, the drinking buddy, the behave yourself, get in the car, do as you're told. And I think it was wonderful because that was the real sort of glue for us was, you know, I was just saying before today, we had this Range Rover. Remember the Range Rover?
I do.
And the argument was, what music do we play when we go from the hotel, the unit hotel, to the set?
And it was never my music.
It was. So yeah, I mean, emotional. Yeah, I mean, first of all, also thank you so much everybody for being here today. Buenos días a todos de España. Mucho gusto, encantado. Schönen guten Nachmittag, die Leute aus Deutschland. Freue mich, dass ihr hier seid. Danke. Bonjour. Ça va bien à tous.
So just showing off.
You mentioned, John, you mentioned there those whom we've lost from Series 1, directors, but we also lost Roderick Horn, who played Ozymandias, and Charlotte Long, who played Eloise. Could you relate to us, John, that story you were telling me yesterday about how Roderick Horn was not just a mentor to Will Parker, he was also a mentor to you as an actor, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I mean, you don't really... preface that by saying I didn't realize how fabulous an actor he was until I saw him actually in the first episode, and it sort of dawned on me, oh my god, I should have listened and asked more, you know. And there was one line I had an issue with, and it was the line where he showed me the binoculars, and there was this girl in school, I forget her name now, and she paints pictures.
She's here today.
She makes me feel something. And I said to him, I just don't get this line. He said, what don't you get about it? Well, I don't understand the bit where he said, she made me feel, what is she supposed to make? Well, who was she? Oh, she was a girl at school. What did she do? She painted pictures. And did you like them? Yeah. Oh, you mean, yeah. Okay. But I'm young, and so I don't really understand that, you know. And it was just wonderful, that little bit of insight and that mentoring that he gave. And immediately I just flew through the line, and I just got it straight away. And thanks to him, you know, so yeah.
Can I just, before we, absent friends, occasions like this will always miss Adrian Andrews.
Yeah, absolutely. The originator of the League of Three Men.
He would have loved today, and I just want to say thank you, Adrian. Yeah.
Nice.
So do you two gentlemen want to talk about Roderick, or do you have anything to say about Roderick? Or shall we,
No, sorry. No,
or shall we talk about Charlotte?
Oh, Charlotte. I remember her every day. So in my religious practice as a Buddhist, I remember her every day in the fifth prayer we have, where we remember the people who've passed away. I think it was sad. Can't really figure it out. What's the meaning of life? Someone so young. Apparently, I think she was sitting in the car on her shoulder, and a truck driver sneezed or something, and you know, just
very sad.
Just blows you away. How can you possibly begin to enunciate how you feel about it? And I remember we were fortunate to be able to go to the funeral, and the number of people for her, their friends and family, was enormous, you know. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just, it struck me as well with Charlotte how Dave, you were saying that we were like tearaways, but maybe you've got to sort of seize the day. I always felt a bit sad that when I heard about her death, that she had always been holding back, and she was kind of saving herself for the rest of her life. And you know, I thought, yeah, that's so something to be said for not saving yourself for the rest of your life.
I agree.
You played that part beautifully.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you're going to answer this one, Dave, but the three of you, how much of you is in the characters that you played? I mean, is Ceri like Beanpole? Is Jim like Henry? John like Will?
I think part of being cast was the luck of the draw. In some ways, I certainly felt that I was lucky enough to look and sound like Henry when I went to the casting, because I just literally read the script. The nerves allow you only just to sit there and read the script, really. And I was lucky enough to look and sound like Henry. I think that the word natural comes to mind, but that's all I could do. I could just only be me, you know, and read the words of Henry and then take on board parts of his character, like he'd lost his mother when he was a young child, etc., and try and sew those in as best I could as a 16-year-old. You know, people need to remember we were just 16, and of course at 16 we knew everything back then. We knew exactly what we were doing, and you know.
You were putting Dave straight a lot of the time.
I mean, I have to say another tribute. Thank God for Dave. I mean, my God, what would have happened? I mean, he said at the beginning, we might not be here if it wasn't. You're right. You're right. If it wasn't for you pulling us together, we wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be enjoying this, and it wouldn't have been as brilliant. We are a foursome us. Unfortunately, Dave never appeared on camera, but he was right there in every scene we shot. You know, really was.
I just looking at that clip, seeing you two young and handsome and bold. That's what you were good at. That kind of we're going to save the world. And Ceri looking slightly bewildered. I think you still are, aren't you? Absolutely. So there is a lot of the characters in them.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, and I was thinking it's so strange that I actually ended up living in near the Montagne Noire, actually, not the White Mountains, they're so-called the Black Mountains in south of France, and in a spiritual community down there, which was a bit like, you know, it could have been the free men, you know, those that want to liberate themselves, they were there. And yes, and sort of, I suppose, feeling, a slight intellectual detachment from the rest of the world, I think, has definitely followed me through, He's chortling away there. You agree?
I do.
So when we just think about the sort of the practical effects of the series, like swinging huge fiberglass legs around on cherry picker cranes, did that help you visualise the tripods themselves?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, when you were talking about the leg building, I was really glad they were there because, they gave a real sense of scale. You know, when you were looking at those legs, you could, in your mind's eye, look up beyond, imagine the head up off in the distance. They were really helpful. I love that, especially at Saltwood Castle when they were sat there, and in the mill pond as well. They were all sitting on their scaffold truss, and you could, when you were sort of at a distance, you could really imagine it there. So when you see it on TV, it wasn't a million miles away from what we were imagining as 16-year-olds. It really did bring it to life.
Yeah, in fact, and some of the most exciting bits, I remember when there was that crane with the green lights going around. And it was actually just a light setup. But we were out in the valleys in Snowdonia, in this huge glacial valley. And you imagine the night has come and we're crouched under the rocks and this bloody great crane comes up with it. It really was really good, real vibe, wasn't it? And I loved it also. Another bit I found really exciting near the end. I think in the second series, and there was some sort of tripod attack, and there were all those. Do you remember those bombs in the metal? We were running through the woods and these bombs were going off.
That's right, going off around,
yeah, this is the problem.
I was very impressed by that, the scene where Will comes off the horse and then the tentacle just rams at it. Yeah. That looked like it was really going for you, that thing. And I was scared stiff when I was 14 watching that, and it dragged you in up through the hole underneath. So it's all done with lighting rigs and a fiberglass tentacle. When you're being lifted up as well, are you wearing a harness under all that? I'm assuming the prop itself isn't lifting you up.
You have the harness, but the harness in the actual tripod arm, they constructed a semicircular bar that was with holes in it that you then put the clips from the harness in. So you weren't actually being held by the fingers of the arm, it was just the inside of it, and then you would go up. And one had to put your arms in a certain way because they could see it. So, we can see it, John, move your arm. That's great to say. What did he say? Attentive but relaxed. Alert but relaxed.
Alert but relaxed.
Alert but relaxed. Yeah, you're alert but relaxed. Dude, I'm 18. What does that mean?
Do any of you have a favourite scene or a favourite line that your character said?
I so loved, I think it was episode 8, where we were all in this tiny little boat. And I loved that scene a lot because I think it was very well written, it was very well lit, and the cameras were so close, and there was no space in this tiny boat. We were actually inside the boat. And we were supposed to be eating this pig soup or whatever it was. This awful soup, absolutely.
It was a Heinz Big Soup.
Oh my God.
I loved it and I ate it all.
It was always cold. It was cold, you know. But what I loved about that scene for me was I really felt that we'd reached this understanding of each other through the months that we've been working together, and we just seemed to connect with the lines, and I thought it was very well directed by Chris at that moment, and the lighting was beautiful and the camera was great, and I really loved that scene for me. I thought that was one of the ones that stands out for me.
I remember I really liked the vagrant scene. Remember in that forest, and we were captured. There's a scene where, because I was fascinated with the whole dystopian thing, which was very much around actually in the sort of Cold War, early 80s. You know? And I mean, it's making it come back now. I'm really sure, because they were all scared of dying in nuclear war again, which is great. So I love the attempts to render these kind of slightly fringy, crazed worlds, you know, like spice smoking crazies in the forest, which is what the vagrants were a bit like. You know, sort of like punk people washed up from the punk era, which was Bristol was full of people like that. That scene, and it was just really nicely done with the kind of they'd built this this totem tripod out of wood. And that was a really nice day, and they got all of these painting tribal thing. It was like Glastonbury 1981. You had to be.
I remember that scene for damaging my knee, getting carted off to hospital, and being replaced by a girl. That really worked for me. There was some great acted scenes like John mentioned, but I have to be honest, the machine guns and the grenade in the tube train,
great bit, yeah.
And setting fire to that building theoretically under the tripod, which had to be done in one. We literally set fire to that. When we started the fire on camera, that was the fire that actually set the whole thing off. There was no going back. So that was really memorable for me, and as a 16-year-old, let's set light to it. They're really great. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
Well, I was just going to say it was for all of us. It was the first time. I'd done a series in London, filmed in London, and they said, "Oh, you're going off to do this thing with tripods," and I said, "All right, we're going filming for a week," and they said, "No, it's 6 months." It was a road trip, wasn't it?
Yeah,
we went on a road trip all around the country. In London as well, we filmed in Whiteley's, the old Whiteley's department store. That was that Parisian stuff you saw. That was all in Whiteley's in London. We went to North Wales and in the slate mines. And none of us had been anywhere like that before, had we? And so it was... we were all making it up as we went along, and I think the BBC was as well. They'd never taken on anything like this. So I remember doing the games, and it was the first time I had ever seen a replication. So we had 50 extras that we put into the stands, and then we moved them all down, and then we moved them all down again. And I thought, I don't know how this is going to work. And then I was lucky enough to go into the workshop at Television Centre afterwards and see it being put together. And they put all the 50, 50, 50, 50, and replicated them, and it looked like one.
Yeah,
but not only that, then they panned the camera across what was effectively 4 shots. Yeah. And it was an extraordinary bit of
the tripods arriving as
they came in. Yeah. And nobody had done it. I mean, Doctor Who was around and so on, so there was a visual effects workshop, but a lot of these things were all brand new, weren't they? So we were all discovering as we went. Yeah. And it was an amazing journey, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Well, my favourite lines from it was, I was the eldest of 4 boys, and I taped the second series and watched it over and over and over, and then when the VHSs came out of the first series, caught up with that and utterly loved it. But me and my brothers, we used to pick up on certain lines of dialogue. So for Ceri it was, "I do not wear a dress." That's when you were in the Weisshaus vineyard and you were putting that long white nightie over. And we picked up on that with Jim, it's obviously I Kill the Tripod Me. And we used to do it with you again and again and again.
I did that 12 or 13 times.
Oh, yeah.
I've got no idea why it was taken out. I think it was just trying to make me cry. Just do it again, but yeah.
And John's is from series 2, which we used to repeat a lot, my brothers and I, and it was, listen, Bol, you run your life and I'll run mine.
In the City of Gold.
Oh, the city.
Yeah,
right.
the City of Gold. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Bol.
Bol.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We wanted it beaten up, didn't we? Yeah.
He was a right nonce.
Does anyone of the audience want to ask a question before we wrap up?
Excellent.
Not one.
Did you guys ever have any props, or I know you guys wanted to get some outfits. Did you guys ever have anything that you were allowed to or not? I know Richard's here. It'd be okay if you said.
I got a cap.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Yeah.
And the costumes never had any pockets.
Oh God.
You were given a little cotton bag on a long string to tie around your waist inside, so you could put your cigarettes, all the things you should have had, a sweet or whatever you wanted. So I've actually still got one of those. God knows why, but yeah, I've got a cap from a dead man.
I really, at one point, I remember these shoes that John talks about. We all had these different really funky shoes handmade by some craftsman. And I had these far out things that were like, with these, almost like a snowshoe effect. And at one point I had them, and then we had to do some catch-up shots and took it back, and they were gone. And I think, damn it, I don't know what.
Yeah.
Anyone know what happened to those shoes? I'd love those.
We all got a handmade thing. Mine was a jacket. You got shoes. I think both, wasn't it? Yeah.
I never took anything. You weren't allowed. It was so weird.
Richard's gone. It's all right.
We wanted to take this, we wanted to take that, but it's continuity. Because if we have to do a reshoot or something goes wrong, you're going to need it, right? So it was difficult. But I remember arguing with Phoebe about the first series, the first 6 episodes. I think it was 4 or 5 episodes where I had this blue thing. And it didn't matter what I did, it was so heavy. It was like chainmail but made of cotton. And over the top of that was this white, and it was like sail canvas.
I remember, yeah.
And I remember when we come out of Paris and we were getting to the Chateau de Bordeaux, and I banged my head or got hit by a brick or whatever, and we were in the water. There was the rain machines from the BBC do function very well. Very well. And because it was video, they had to make the raindrops enormously large so it could register on the camera. And this blue cotton shirt, whatever, used to weigh me down with all the water. It just was so heavy. And I kept falling over. And I remember Graham was particularly upset with me because, why you keep falling over, Ken? You're supposed to be stumbling. No. I just remember that. And I remember saying to Phoebe, when we come out, I really don't want this anymore. She was very obliging.
Okay, anyone else? Gentleman there?
You're on the topic of dystopian futures, obviously. How do you feel about the fact that it's probably quite likely that the gaps that you now have with Series 3 might potentially be filled by AI? Somebody might want to create your likenesses out of AI and try and fill in those gaps. But obviously, I'm sure it would come from a place of love rather than profit. But yeah, how do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, I'm waiting actually for the AI dictator to take over our entire life. So, just the 3rd series.
Just hope it's a tripod.
By the way, I don't think that would necessarily be a bad thing.
This is the sort of conversation we used to have every morning on the way to work.
No change at all.
Quite cosmic. And I was just actually on that subject, by the way. Which of us was the Donna Summer fan? Was it you?
No.
Because I still love that State of Independence track. This is one of the... Anyone know Donna
I think it was
Summer's
you,
State
John,
of
wasn't it?
Independence?
No.
Oh, how did we get that? Because
I think it was out at the time, wasn't it? It was just in the
That's
charts.
one
at
of
the
my-
time.
Yeah, maybe it was. It was. It was all part of. I'd had it drummed into me at the BBC that you deliver actors to the set in the best mood possible for the best performance they can give.
Oh, I see.
And that was part of it. You know, thump the music on,
Yeah.
and we'd rock all the way to location. It
On
was
the AI
great.
side, I've never thought about that actually, but
No.
I myself do a bit of writing now and then, and I haven't shared this with maybe a few people, but I actually, during the pandemic, wrote a third series as a synopsis in episodical format, did about 70 pages, and it was 35 years after we had discovered that the Freemen were destroyed. And I really wanted to explore, for my own benefit, the characters of Henry and Jean Paul. So we stopped calling them Beanpole because we're much older. And what their lives were like. So Jean Paul was running the Freemen. Henry was in charge of tactics and defense. And Will was on his mission somewhere doing whatever he was doing, nothing really important. And how they then came together and what they were doing. And Henry was very sort of direct and to the point and let's do it. And Jean-Paul is very much a, well, let's analyse this, let's take a look at it. I think, but we should all make the choice. And Will was just sort of like, yeah, well, that kind of thing. And it's interesting because your question, I'd never thought about it. I always thought, you know, what if we were 35 years older, even though in the story we say that these machines are coming to change the atmosphere. Well, there was a solar supernova, a star, and it delayed them, right? For the masses, it's not a problem. So yeah, I mean, I thought that would be great. And I really enjoyed it for my own benefit, writing it, and it was kind of fun because then we get to go to Panama and Henry has his moment, and John Paul's there and everything like that. It was really good. It was really fun, and I think that's something I really enjoyed doing. So.
Richard, before you disappear, there's an idea form in here. ABBA did it, didn't they?
You said you needed a new project. I think John's just written it.
Make series 3
John's just written it.
With AI.
with AI, avatar, like ABBA.
You produce it.
And on that note, so now we come to the parting of the Parkers, yes? I had to get that in Robin quotes. Let's hear it for John Shackley. Jim Baker. Ceri Seel. And Dave Edwards.